The empty coffee cup sat cold on the marble countertop, a cruel reminder that Ethan Rodriguez was completely and utterly alone. His penthouse, which usually felt like a castle of success, now felt like a prison of his own making. The morning sun streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows, casting harsh shadows across the space where Gabrielle Washington had been just 12 hours ago. He stared at the note she'd left, written in elegant handwriting on hotel stationery. "Thank you for everything. Please don't look for me. G." But it wasn't just any ordinary goodbye note that made his hands shake as he held it. Crumpled beside his bed, he'd found a positive pregnancy test. 3 of them, actually. Ethan's mind raced back to their conversation the night before. Gabrielle had seemed different, distant, worried about something she wouldn't share. When he'd pressed her about staying the night, she'd looked at him with those deep brown eyes that had captivated him from the moment they met at the charity gala 6 weeks ago, and said something that now made perfect sense. "Some things are too complicated for people like us." He'd thought she was talking about their different worlds, him being a tech mogul worth millions, her being a woman who clearly came from more modest means. He'd been wrong. So very wrong. Now, standing in his empty penthouse at 7 in the morning, wearing nothing but wrinkled dress pants from the night before, Ethan felt something he hadn't experienced since building his company from nothing: complete helplessness. The pregnancy tests weren't just positive. They showed indicators for multiple births. The medical terminology was confusing, but one thing was crystal clear. Gabrielle was carrying his children. More than one child. And she was gone. His phone buzzed with notifications from his assistant about board meetings and investor calls, but all Ethan could think about was the way Gabrielle had touched her stomach unconsciously during dinner, how she'd only ordered sparkling water instead of wine, how she'd excused herself to the bathroom 3 times during their evening together. She'd known. She'd known she was pregnant, and she'd spent one last night with him before disappearing into thin air. Ethan walked to his panoramic windows overlooking the city skyline. Somewhere out there, in this massive urban landscape, was the woman carrying his children. The woman who had somehow managed to slip past his penthouse security, his doorman, and vanish without leaving so much as a forwarding address. He tried calling her phone, disconnected. He'd driven to the address she'd given him when they first met. It led to a mail forwarding service that refused to give him any information. Even the charity organization where they'd first encountered each other claimed they had no current contact information for Gabrielle Washington. It was as if she'd never existed at all. But she had existed. She'd laughed at his terrible jokes about coding. She'd listened to his stories about building his company with genuine interest, not the fake enthusiasm he usually encountered from women who were more interested in his bank account than his dreams. She'd shared her own dreams too. Something about working with children, making a difference in young lives. And now she was gone, taking his unborn children with her. Ethan had built a tech empire by solving problems, by finding solutions where others saw only obstacles. But this wasn't a coding bug he could fix with late nights and determination. This was a woman who clearly didn't want to be found, who had reasons for running that he couldn't begin to understand. His reflection in the window showed a man who looked older than his 32 years. Dark hair disheveled, brown eyes filled with confusion and something else. A longing he hadn't expected to feel. Because somewhere between their first dance at the charity gala and waking up alone in his bed, Ethan had realized that what he felt for Gabrielle went far beyond physical attraction. He'd fallen in love with her. And now she was gone, along with the children he didn't even know he wanted until he'd lost them. The intercom buzzed, startling him from his thoughts. "Mr. Rodriguez? Your driver is here for your 9 o'clock meeting." Ethan looked at the pregnancy test still scattered on his nightstand, then at the note with its polite but firm goodbye. He made a decision that would change everything. "Cancel all my meetings today," he said into the intercom. "And get me Janet Torres on the phone." Janet Torres was the best private investigator in the city. If anyone could find Gabrielle Washington, it would be her. Because Ethan Rodriguez hadn't built a multimillion-dollar company by giving up when things got complicated. And despite what Gabrielle's note said, he had no intention of not looking for her. She was carrying his children. But more than that, she was carrying his heart. And he was going to find them all. 3 days had passed since Gabrielle's disappearance, and Ethan's penthouse had transformed into a makeshift command center. Janet Torres, a sharp-eyed woman in her 50s with silver-streaked hair and an impressive track record, had spread photographs, documents, and maps across his dining room table. "She's good," Janet admitted, adjusting her reading glasses as she studied a timeline they'd constructed. "Professional-level good. Most people leave digital footprints everywhere. Social media, credit cards, cell phone pings. Gabrielle Washington has gone completely off the grid. Ethan paced behind her, running his hands through his hair for what felt like the 100th time that morning. What do you mean, professional level? I mean, she knew exactly how to disappear. Closed her bank accounts in cash, terminated her phone contract, used only cash transactions for 3 days before vanishing completely. Either she's done this before, or she had help from someone who knows how these things work. The implications of Janet's words settled over Ethan like a cold blanket. Who was Gabrielle Washington really? What had driven her to develop such careful escape plans? Tell me again about how you met her, Janet said, pulling out a fresh notepad. Ethan sat down across from her, his mind drifting back to that night 6 weeks ago. The Children's Hospital charity gala at the Meridian Hotel. She was there alone, wearing a simple black dress. Not like the other women there, she wasn't trying to network or impress anyone. She was actually reading the informational displays about the hospital's programs. Did she approach you or did you approach her? I approached her. She was standing in front of a display about the pediatric cancer ward, and she was crying. Just quietly, like she didn't want anyone to notice. I offered her my handkerchief. Janet made notes. What did you talk about? The hospital, initially. She knew a lot about pediatric care, more than someone would know from just reading brochures. She talked about how important it was for sick children to have advocates, people who truly cared about their well-being beyond just medical treatment. Did she mention working at the hospital? Ethan paused, trying to remember exact conversations. Not directly. But she spoke like someone with experience. When I asked what she did for work, she said she was between opportunities and changed the subject. Janet tapped her pen against her notepad. I've been through the guest list from that charity gala. Gabrielle Washington wasn't on it. What do you mean? I mean she wasn't an invited guest. She somehow got into a $500 a plate charity dinner without being on the official guest list. Security footage shows her arriving alone, but there's no record of how she got past the check-in desk. Ethan felt his world tilt slightly. She crashed the party? Looks that way. But here's what's interesting. She made a $5,000 donation to the Children's Hospital that night. The hospital has a record of it, along with a note saying the money was specifically for pediatric nursing supplies. $5,000 cash? Ethan repeated. How does someone who's between opportunities have that kind of money to donate? That's what we need to find out. Janet pulled out another folder. I've been digging into public records. There are 3 Gabrielle Washingtons in this city. One is 72 years old, one is married with 4 kids and has lived in the same neighborhood for 10 years, and one. She paused dramatically. One used to work at Children's Hospital as a pediatric nurse until 8 months ago. Ethan leaned forward. Used to work there? Gabrielle Washington, age 28, was employed as a senior pediatric nurse at Children's Hospital for 5 years. Excellent performance reviews, loved by patients and families, no disciplinary actions. Then suddenly 8 months ago she was laid off due to budget constraints. Budget constraints? The hospital eliminated 12 nursing positions last year. Gabrielle was one of them. But here's the interesting part. According to her former supervisor, whom I spoke with yesterday, Gabrielle didn't take the layoff well. She'd become very attached to several long-term pediatric patients. Losing her job meant losing contact with kids she'd been caring for, some for years. Ethan felt pieces of a puzzle clicking into place. That's why she was crying at the charity gala. She was there for the kids she couldn't help anymore. And why she made such a large donation. Guilt, maybe, or a way to still contribute even though she couldn't be there in person. Janet pulled out more documents. After she lost her job, Gabrielle took several temporary positions, retail, restaurant work, nothing in her field. Her last known address was a studio apartment in Riverside, but she moved out 2 months ago. Landlord says she paid her lease termination fee in cash and left no forwarding address. 2 months ago, Ethan repeated. Right around the time we met. It gets more interesting. The day after she met you, Gabrielle visited a women's health clinic in the downtown area. Paid for services in cash, no insurance filed. Ethan's heart clenched. She knew she was pregnant. Looks that way. And based on the timeline, she continued seeing you for several weeks while knowing about the pregnancy. The question is why? Ethan stood up and walked to his windows again. The city stretched out below him, millions of people living their lives, pursuing their dreams, dealing with their problems. Somewhere out there was Gabrielle, alone and pregnant with his children. Maybe she was trying to figure out how to tell me, he said quietly. Or maybe she was trying to figure out whether you were someone worth telling. The harsh possibility in Janet's words stung, but Ethan couldn't dismiss it. What did Gabrielle really know about him? That he was wealthy, successful, attended charity events. But what had he shown her about his character, his values, his capacity for commitment? Their time together had been wonderful, but it had also been careful. Elegant dinners, cultural events, conversations that stayed on safe topics. He'd been attracted to her intelligence and kindness, but had he ever shown her who he really was beneath the successful businessman exterior? Mr. Rodriguez, Janet continued, I need to ask you something directly. What were your intentions with Gabrielle Washington? Ethan turned back to face her. What do you mean? I mean, were you looking for a serious relationship, or was this more of a casual arrangement? Because if she perceived this as temporary, finding out she was pregnant would explain why she ran. The question hit harder than Ethan expected. What had his intentions been? He'd enjoyed Gabrielle's company, looked forward to seeing her, felt things he hadn't felt in years. But had he communicated any of that to her? I don't know, he admitted. I mean, I cared about her. More than I've cared about anyone in a long time. But we never talked about the future. I assumed we had time to figure it out. Well, now you're out of time. She's pregnant with your children and she's gone. The question is, what are you going to do about it? Ethan looked at the photographs spread across his table. Images of the woman who had somehow managed to capture his heart in just 6 weeks, then disappear like smoke. A woman who was now carrying 3 babies that were half his. I'm going to find her, he said firmly. And I'm going to prove to her that she doesn't have to do this alone. Janet nodded. Good. Because I think I know where to start looking. Meanwhile, 300 miles away in the small coastal town of Millfield, Gabrielle Washington stood at the window of her tiny rented room above Peterson's diner, watching seagulls circle the harbor. Her hand rested unconsciously on her still flat stomach, a gesture that had become automatic since discovering the pregnancy. 3 babies. The ultrasound technician had needed to double-check, then triple-check. Triplets were rare enough, but healthy triplets required careful monitoring, proper nutrition, and medical care that cost more money than Gabrielle had ever seen in her life. She'd spent the last 3 days since arriving in Millfield trying to formulate a plan. The diner needed waitstaff, and the owner, Mrs. Helen Peterson, had been kind enough to offer her a room upstairs in exchange for working the morning shift. It wasn't much, but it was honest work and a place to stay while she figured out her next steps. The problem was she was running out of options. Gabrielle pulled out a worn notebook where she'd been calculating expenses. Prenatal care for triplets, especially high-risk pregnancies like hers appeared to be, would cost thousands of dollars. Then there was the delivery, which would almost certainly require a cesarean section and extended hospital stay. After that, 3 babies meant 3 times the diapers, formula, clothes, and medical checkups. Even if she worked full-time at the diner, she'd never earn enough to cover everything the babies would need. The cruel irony wasn't lost on her. She'd spent 5 years as a pediatric nurse, caring for other people's children, helping families navigate medical crises and celebrate recoveries. She knew exactly what good medical care looked like and exactly how much it cost. A soft knock on her door interrupted her calculations. Gabrielle? You okay up there, honey? Mrs. Peterson's voice carried concern that had become familiar over the past few days. I'm fine, Mrs. Peterson. Just resting before the dinner shift. Well, come down when you're ready. We've got a full house tonight and I could use your help. Gabrielle heard footsteps retreating down the creaky stairs. Helen Peterson was a widow in her 60s who had run the diner for 20 years. She was kind, practical, and had asked no questions when Gabrielle showed up with a single suitcase and a request for work. The type of woman who recognized someone in trouble and offered help without judgment. The type of woman Gabrielle wished she could have been honest with. But how could she explain that she was running from a multimillionaire who had no idea he was about to become a father of 3? How could she describe the panic that had consumed her when she realized she was pregnant with Ethan Rodriguez's children? Ethan, with his penthouse and private driver and casual mentions of business deals worth more than most people made in a lifetime. Ethan, who had treated their relationship like an unpleasant interlude between business meetings. Ethan, who had never once mentioned wanting children or family or anything beyond the elegant dinners and cultural events they'd shared. Gabrielle had watched him during their time together, studied the way he interacted with the world. He was generous, intelligent, and undeniably kind. But he was also someone who lived in a carefully controlled environment where problems were solved with money and inconveniences were handled by assistants. What would happen when he discovered that their casual relationship had resulted in 3 babies who would need attention, care, and love for the next 18 years? Would he see them as problems to be solved? Inconveniences to be managed? Or worse, would he try to take them away from her? Gabrielle had heard stories, wealthy men who used their resources to gain custody of children, who could afford legal teams that ordinary people couldn't fight against. The thought of losing her babies to someone who might see them as obligations rather than blessings terrified her more than facing poverty. She looked down at her notebook again, at the impossible math of raising 3 children on a waitress's salary. Maybe she was being unfair to Ethan. Maybe he would have been supportive, even excited about the pregnancy. But maybe wasn't good enough when 3 innocent lives were at stake. A wave of nausea hit her, stronger than the morning sickness she'd been experiencing. Gabrielle rushed to the small bathroom attached to her room and barely made it to the toilet before losing what little she'd managed to eat for lunch. When the wave passed, she sat on the bathroom floor and cried. Not the gentle tears she'd shed at the charity gala when remembering her former patients, but deep, racking sobs born of fear and exhaustion and complete uncertainty about the future. She was 28 years old, unemployed, pregnant with triplets, and completely alone in a strange town. The money she'd saved from her last few temp jobs was running out quickly, and her body was already showing signs that this pregnancy would be more difficult than normal. Yesterday, she'd called the local women's health clinic to ask about prenatal care options for someone without insurance. The receptionist had been kind but clear about the costs involved. Even with sliding scale fees, the money required was far beyond what Gabrielle could earn at the diner. She needed help. Real help, from someone with resources and connections. She needed Ethan. But admitting that felt like admitting failure, like confirming that she couldn't handle this situation on her own. Gabrielle had been independent her entire adult life. She'd put herself through nursing school, built a career she loved, helped countless families during their most vulnerable moments. Now she was the one who was vulnerable, and the man who could help her was someone she'd run away from. Another knock on her door, more urgent this time. Gabrielle, we need you downstairs. Mrs. Chin just called in sick and we're about to get slammed with the dinner rush. Coming. Gabrielle called back, splashing cold water on her face and trying to pull herself together. She could figure out the future later. Right now, she needed to focus on getting through each day. The babies needed her to stay healthy and strong, which meant working to pay for food and shelter. Everything else would have to wait. But as she headed downstairs to face another shift of smiling at customers and pretending everything was fine, Gabrielle couldn't shake the feeling that time was running out. The babies were growing, her body was changing, and soon she wouldn't be able to hide her condition. Soon she would have to make decisions that would affect not just her future, but the futures of 3 innocent children who deserved better than a mother running away from their father. The thought followed her down the stairs and into the busy diner, where the evening rush was about to begin and she could lose herself in the familiar rhythm of taking orders and serving food to people whose lives seemed so much simpler than her own. Back in the city, Ethan stood in the middle of what used to be Gabrielle's studio apartment, now completely empty except for scuff marks on the hardwood floors and the lingering scent of vanilla candles. Janet had managed to convince the landlord to let them inside, though there was nothing left to find. She was thorough, Janet observed, running her finger along a windowsill and finding only dust. Most people leave something behind when they move quickly, a forgotten item in a closet, paperwork, something. This place has been cleaned professionally. Ethan walked to the window that overlooked a small community garden. He could imagine Gabrielle standing here, looking out at the carefully tended flowers and vegetables, maybe finding peace in the simple beauty of growing things. Her former landlord said she was a perfect tenant, Janet continued, reading from her notes. Quiet, paid rent on time, helped elderly neighbors carry groceries. The woman in 2B was particularly fond of her. Said Gabrielle used to bring her homemade soup when she was feeling sick. She took care of people, Ethan said quietly. That's who she is. According to the landlord, Gabrielle spent her last week here having long phone conversations. He could hear her through the thin walls, though he couldn't make out specific words. He said she sounded upset, like she was trying to make difficult decisions. Ethan's chest tightened. Had she been trying to decide whether to tell him about the pregnancy? Had she been looking for another solution, some way to handle the situation without involving him? Janet's phone buzzed. She answered quickly, then her expression changed. We need to go, she said urgently. That was my contact at the women's health clinic. Gabrielle Washington was seen at an emergency room in Millfield 3 days ago. Emergency room? Ethan's heart skipped. Is she okay? Unknown. But Millfield is a small coastal town about 3 hours north of here. If she's there, she might still be there. The drive to Millfield felt endless. Ethan sat in the passenger seat of Janet's sedan, watching highway signs count down the miles while his mind raced through worst-case scenarios. Emergency room visits during early pregnancy could mean any number of complications. Bleeding, severe morning sickness requiring 4 fluids or worse. He'd spent the past hour on his phone, researching triplet pregnancies, and what he'd learned terrified him. Higher risk of complications, more frequent monitoring required, greater chance of premature labor. Gabrielle needed specialized medical care, not emergency room visits in small towns that might not have the resources to handle high-risk pregnancies. "Tell me about Millfield," he said, needing distraction from his racing thoughts. "Population about 8,000, fishing and tourism economy, 1 small hospital, 2 medical clinics," Janet recited. "The kind of place where everyone knows everyone, which could work in our favor. If Gabrielle is there, someone will have noticed a new face." As they drove into Millfield's downtown area, Ethan was struck by how different it was from the city. Small shops lined Main Street, fishing boats bobbed in the harbor, and people walked at a pace that suggested they had nowhere urgent to be. It was exactly the kind of place someone might go to disappear. Janet parked in front of Peterson's Diner, the type of local establishment that served as an unofficial community center in small towns. "Let's start here," she said. "Diners are information hubs. If there's a new person in town, the staff will know about it." They entered to find a cozy space filled with the aroma of coffee and home cooking. Mismatched tables and chairs gave the place character, and photographs of local fishing boats decorated the walls. A woman in her 60s approached them with menus and warm smiles. "Welcome to Peterson's. I'm Helen. You folks just passing through, or are you planning to stay in our little town for a while?" "Actually, we're looking for someone," Janet said, showing Helen a photograph of Gabrielle. "Have you seen this woman? Her name is Gabrielle Washington." Helen's expression immediately became guarded. "May I ask why you're looking for her?" Ethan stepped forward. "I'm Ethan Rodriguez. Gabrielle is, she's someone very important to me. I need to make sure she's safe." Helen studied him carefully, the way small-town people assess strangers who might pose a threat to someone they care about. "She's not in any trouble," Ethan added quickly. "I just need to talk to her. Please." Something in his tone must have convinced Helen, because her posture relaxed slightly. "She's upstairs resting. Poor thing had a dizzy spell during the lunch shift and nearly fainted right in the middle of the dining room. I sent her up to lie down." Ethan's heart clenched. "Is she okay? Has she seen a doctor?" "She went to the emergency room a few days ago when she first arrived. They gave her some medication for morning sickness and told her to rest. But between you and me, she looks like she needs more help than she's getting." "Can I see her?" Ethan asked. "Please. I know she might not want to see me, but I need to know she's safe." Helen considered this for a long moment. "I'll go ask her. But I won't force her to talk to anyone she doesn't want to talk to, you understand? That girl's been through enough." Helen disappeared up a narrow staircase at the back of the diner. Ethan paced the small space, his hands shaking with nervous energy. Gabrielle was here. She was sick, but she was here. After what felt like hours, Helen returned alone. "She'll see you," Helen said. "But just you and just for a few minutes. She's not feeling well." Ethan followed Helen up the creaky stairs to a door marked "Private." Helen knocked softly. "Gabby?" "He's here." The door opened and Ethan's breath caught in his throat. Gabrielle stood before him, thinner than he remembered, her dark skin pale with exhaustion. She wore a simple blue dress that couldn't quite hide the fact that she was protecting her midsection with one arm. Her beautiful brown eyes were rimmed with fatigue, but they were as intelligent and kind as ever. "Hello, Ethan," she said quietly. "Gabrielle." He wanted to rush to her, to take her in his arms and promise that everything would be okay. But the careful distance she maintained warned him to proceed slowly. "Are you all right?" She nodded, though her grip on the doorframe suggested standing was taking effort. "I'm fine." "You're not fine. Helen said you nearly fainted, that you've been to the emergency room." "Gabrielle, why didn't you tell me?" Her eyes filled with tears, but her voice remained steady. "Because I knew you'd react exactly like this. Like I'm a problem that needs to be solved." "You're not a problem," Ethan said urgently. "You're carrying my children. Our children. And you're trying to handle a high-risk pregnancy by yourself while working at a diner and living above a restaurant. That's not solving anything, that's just dangerous." "Our children?" Gabrielle's voice was barely a whisper. "Yes, our children. 3 of them, apparently. And I want to be part of their lives, Gabrielle. I want to be part of your life." She leaned against the doorframe and Ethan could see the internal battle playing out across her face. hope warring with fear, exhaustion fighting with determination. "I don't know if I can trust you," she admitted finally. "Then let me prove it to you," Ethan said. "Let me help. Please." For a moment, Gabrielle looked like she might say yes. But then she shook her head. "I need time to think. This is all happening so fast." "We don't have time," Ethan said gently. "You need proper medical care. The babies need proper medical care. Whatever you're afraid of, we can work through it together." Gabrielle's hand moved to her stomach, and Ethan saw her wince slightly. "Are you in pain?" he asked, alarmed. "Just tired," she said, but her face told a different story. Helen appeared at the top of the stairs. "I think that's enough for today. Gabby needs her rest." Ethan wanted to argue, wanted to stay until Gabrielle agreed to let him help. But he could see that pushing now would only drive her further away. "I'm staying in town," he told Gabrielle. "At the Harbor Inn. When you're ready to talk, I'll be there." Gabrielle nodded but didn't meet his eyes. As Ethan walked back down the stairs, he heard Helen's voice drifting from above. "That man loves you, honey. Whatever you're running from, maybe it's time to stop running." Ethan left the diner with hope and worry warring in his chest. He'd found Gabrielle, but she was clearly struggling more than she wanted to admit. The careful way she moved, the exhaustion in her eyes, the protective way she held her stomach, everything suggested that this pregnancy was taking a toll on her body. Time was running out, and Gabrielle's stubbornness might cost all four of them more than she realized. Dr. Patricia Miller had been practicing obstetric medicine in Millfield for 15 years, and she recognized desperation when she saw it. The young woman sitting across from her desk was trying very hard to appear calm and in control, but the slight tremor in her hands and the dark circles under her eyes told a different story. "Miss Washington," Dr. Miller said gently, "I've reviewed your emergency room records and the blood work we did yesterday. I'm concerned about several things." Gabrielle straightened in her chair. "The morning sickness is getting better. I've been able to keep some food down today. It's not just the morning sickness. Your blood pressure is elevated, you're anemic, and you've lost weight instead of gaining it. With triplets, your body needs significantly more support than a single pregnancy. Are you taking prenatal vitamins?" I bought some at the pharmacy, but they're expensive. I've been taking them every other day to make them last longer." Dr. Miller sighed. This was the part of small-town medicine she hated, good people making impossible choices because they couldn't afford proper health care. "Gabrielle, I need to be direct with you. Triplet pregnancies require intensive monitoring and specialized care. You need to be seeing a high-risk pregnancy specialist, having ultrasounds every few weeks, and maintaining excellent nutrition. What you need isn't available in Millfield." Gabrielle's composure finally cracked. "I know that. I used to be a pediatric nurse. I understand exactly what these babies need. But I don't have insurance and I can't afford specialized care. I'm trying to do the best I can with what I have." "Why don't you have insurance? You said you were a nurse." "I was laid off 8 months ago. I've been working temporary jobs since then, nothing that offered benefits." Dr. Miller leaned forward. "Gabrielle, there are programs available to help women in your situation. Medicaid, charitable care programs, sliding scale fees. Have you applied for any assistance?" "I tried. The paperwork is complicated and I don't have a permanent address. Most programs require you to be a resident of the state for a certain period of time, and I just moved here." "What about the father? Is he able to help with medical expenses?" Gabrielle's face went completely blank. "The father isn't in the picture." Dr. Miller had heard that phrase countless times, usually from women whose situations were more complicated than they wanted to discuss. But something about Gabrielle's tone suggested this wasn't a case of abandonment or irresponsibility. "Sometimes fathers don't know their fathers," Dr. Miller said carefully. "Sometimes women make assumptions about how men will react without giving them a chance to prove those assumptions wrong." Gabrielle was quiet for a long moment. "What if he tries to take them away from me?" There it was. Fear, not pride, was driving Gabrielle's decisions. "Is there a reason to think he would do that? Is he abusive or dangerous?" "No, nothing like that. He's a good man. But he's also very wealthy and I'm not. If he decided he wanted custody, he could afford lawyers I could never fight against." Dr. Miller nodded. She'd seen this fear before, though usually not in cases where the father was actually a good person. "Gabrielle, I can't give you legal advice, but I can tell you this. Courts don't automatically award custody to the wealthier parent. They look at what's best for the children. A loving mother who prioritizes their well-being is what's best for children. But what if he thinks I can't provide for them properly? What if he's right? Can you provide love, attention, and care? Of course. Then you can provide what matters most. Money can buy a lot of things, but it can't buy the bond between a mother and her children. Gabrielle wiped away tears she hadn't realized were falling. I'm scared. I've never been this scared in my life. Being scared doesn't make you weak, Gabrielle. Makes you human. But letting fear make decisions for you isn't fair to you or your babies. Dr. Miller pulled out a business card. This is Dr. Jennifer Santos. She's a maternal fetal medicine specialist in the city, about 3 hours from here. She handles high-risk multiple births, and she works with several charitable programs that help women without insurance. Gabrielle took the card but didn't look at it. I can't afford to travel back and forth to the city for appointments. I barely have enough money for gas to get there once. What if transportation and medical expenses weren't an issue? What if someone was willing to help with all of that? You mean the father? I mean someone who cares about you and wants these babies to be healthy. Whether that's the father, a family member, or even a charitable organization. The point is, help is available if you're willing to accept it. Gabrielle stared out the window at Millfield's quiet Main Street. He found me yesterday. The father? Yes. He's staying at the Harbor Inn. He wants to help, but I don't know if I can trust his motives. What are you afraid his motives are? I'm afraid he sees this as an obligation. Something he has to deal with because it's the right thing to do. I don't want my children to grow up feeling like burdens. Dr. Miller leaned back in her chair. Gabrielle, I've been doing this for 15 years. I've seen men react to unexpected pregnancies in every way imaginable. The ones who see children as burdens don't usually hire private investigators to track down the mother. They don't drive 300 miles to a small town and check into a motel to wait for a chance to talk. How do you know about the private investigator? Small town. Word travels fast. The point is, a man who sees children as an obligation doesn't go to those lengths. A man who's in love does. The words hung in the air between them. Gabrielle had been so focused on her fears about Ethan's wealth and power that she hadn't considered the possibility that his feelings for her might be genuine. I need more time to think, Gabrielle said finally. Time is something you don't have much of, Dr. Miller replied gently. These babies are growing and your body is struggling to keep up. Every day you delay proper medical care increases the risks for all four of you. As if to emphasize the doctor's point, Gabrielle felt a familiar wave of dizziness wash over her. She gripped the arms of her chair until it passed. When was the last time you ate a full meal? Dr. Miller asked. This morning. I had toast and some orange juice. That's not a full meal. You need protein, calcium, iron. Your body is trying to build 3 human beings and you're giving it toast. Gabrielle knew the doctor was right. She also knew that her paycheck from the diner wouldn't stretch to cover the kind of nutrition she needed, the prenatal vitamins she should be taking, and the regular medical monitoring the babies required. If I talk to him, Gabrielle said slowly, and if he offers to help, how do I know it's not just guilt or obligation? You listen to what he says, you watch what he does, and you trust your instincts. You're an intelligent woman, Gabrielle. You'll know the difference between someone who's helping because they have to and someone who's helping because they want to. Dr. Miller stood up. I'm going to give you some samples of prenatal vitamins to get you through the next few weeks. But I want you to think seriously about what I've said. These babies deserve the best possible start in life, and right now, you're not able to give them that on your own. As Gabrielle walked back toward the diner, Dr. Miller's words echoed in her mind. She'd spent so much energy running from Ethan that she hadn't stopped to consider what running might cost her children. But accepting help meant admitting she couldn't handle everything alone. It meant trusting someone whose world was so different from hers that she couldn't predict how he would react to the reality of raising 3 children. Most terrifying of all, it meant opening her heart to the possibility that Ethan's feelings for her were real, which would make her own feelings impossible to ignore. Because the truth she'd been avoiding was simple. She'd fallen in love with Ethan Rodriguez too. And love, combined with 3 babies and impossible circumstances, was the most frightening thing she'd ever faced. Helen Peterson had run her diner for 20 years, and she'd developed a sixth sense about people. The young man who'd been sitting in booth 3 for the past 4 hours, nursing the same cup of coffee and staring out the window, was clearly waiting for something. Or someone. Ethan had positioned himself where he could see both the diner's entrance and the staircase leading to Gabrielle's room. He'd ordered breakfast, then lunch, then dinner, barely touching any of it while hoping she might come downstairs. You know, Helen said, refilling his coffee for the 6th time, Staring at those stairs isn't going to make her come down any faster. I'm not staring, Ethan protested, though he immediately looked away from the staircase. And I suppose you ordered 3 meals because you were extra hungry today. Ethan managed a sheepish smile. I'm sorry. I don't mean to take up your booth all day. It's just. You're worried about her. I'm terrified about her, Ethan corrected. She's pregnant with triplets, she's clearly not getting proper medical care, and she's trying to handle everything alone because she doesn't trust me enough to let me help. Helen sat down across from him, something she rarely did during business hours. Can I ask you something personal? Ethan nodded. What exactly were your intentions with Gabby before you knew about the babies? It was the same question Janet had asked, and Ethan still didn't have a simple answer. I cared about her. More than I'd cared about anyone in a long time. I looked forward to seeing her, talking to her. She made me want to be a better person. But did you see a future with her? Ethan was quiet for a moment. I was afraid to think about the future. My life is complicated, business demands, travel, responsibilities. I didn't know if someone like Gabrielle would want to be part of that world. Someone like Gabrielle? Someone real. Someone who cares more about helping sick children than attending fancy parties. Someone who makes homemade soup for elderly neighbors instead of networking with potential investors. Helen nodded slowly. So you put her in a box labeled "too good for my world," and kept things casual to protect her from your complicated life. I guess so. And now she's put you in a box labeled "too rich and powerful to trust," and she's protecting herself and her babies from your complicated life. The parallel hit Ethan like a physical blow. We've both been making assumptions instead of talking honestly about what we wanted. Seems like it. The question is, what are you going to do about it now? Before Ethan could answer, the diner's bell chimed and Gabrielle appeared at the bottom of the stairs. She moved carefully, one hand on the railing, the other resting protectively on her stomach. Ethan started to stand, but Helen put a hand on his arm. Let her come to you, Helen whispered. Don't chase her. Gabrielle looked around the diner, her eyes finding Ethan almost immediately. For a moment, they simply looked at each other across the small space. Then she walked slowly to his booth. May I sit down? She asked. Of course. Ethan slid over to make room, trying not to notice how pale she looked or how carefully she lowered herself onto the bench. Helen brought Gabrielle a glass of ginger ale without being asked. This should help settle your stomach, honey. Thank you, Gabrielle said, taking a small sip. They sat in silence for several minutes, the weight of everything unsaid hanging between them. I talked to Dr. Miller today, Gabrielle said finally. What did she say? That I need specialized medical care I can't afford. That the babies are at risk if I don't get proper monitoring and treatment. That I'm being foolish by trying to handle this alone. Ethan chose his words carefully. She's right about the medical care. Triplet pregnancies are high risk. You need to be seeing a maternal fetal medicine specialist. I know that. I used to be a nurse, remember? I know exactly what these babies need and I know exactly how much it costs. Then let me help. Gabrielle was quiet for a long moment. Why? Because they're my children too. Because you shouldn't have to choose between your health and your finances. Because I care about you. Do you? Or do you just feel guilty? Ethan turned to face her fully. Gabrielle, I've spent the past week hiring private investigators, driving to small towns and camping out in diners hoping for a chance to talk to you. Does that sound like guilt to you? It sounds like responsibility. Like doing the right thing because it's what decent people do. What would it take to convince you that this isn't just about responsibility? Gabrielle stared into her ginger ale. I don't know. I've never been in a situation like this before. Neither have I. But I know I don't want you to go through it alone. Just then, the diner's door chimed again and a woman with 2 young children entered. The children, a boy about 6 and a girl around 4, were arguing loudly about something while their mother tried to calm them down. I want to sit by the window, the little girl declared. We sat by the window last time, the boy protested. It's my turn to pick. Their mother looked exhausted. Can we please just sit anywhere and order some food? Mommy's very tired. Gabrielle watched the family scene with an expression Ethan couldn't quite read. When the little girl started crying because she couldn't have the window seat, Gabrielle stood up. Excuse me, she said to the mother. Would you like to use our booth? We can move and your children can both see out the window from here. The mother looked surprised. Are you sure? That's very kind of you. Of course. Gabrielle was already gathering her things. Children should get what makes them happy when possible. As they moved to a different table, Ethan watched Gabrielle interact briefly with the two children, asking about their day and complimenting the little girl's colorful backpack. The transformation in her demeanor was remarkable. She lit up around the kids in a way that reminded him of how she'd looked when talking about the pediatric hospital. "You're going to be an amazing mother," he said once they were settled at their new table. Gabrielle's hand moved unconsciously to her stomach. "I hope so. I want to be." "But wanting something and being able to provide it aren't the same thing." "What do you mean?" "I mean those children will need more than love. They'll need stability, good schools, college funds, opportunities one can't give them on a waitress's salary. So let me help provide those things." "And what happens when you get tired of playing family? What happens when the novelty wears off and you realize that raising 3 children is exhausting and expensive and complicated?" Ethan reached across the table and took her hand. "Gabrielle, look at me." She raised her eyes to meet his. "I'm not playing anything. I'm not here because of novelty or guilt or obligation. I'm here because the thought of you struggling alone with my children makes me feel like I can't breathe. I'm here because I realized that losing you was the worst thing that's ever happened to me." Tears filled Gabrielle's eyes. "But what if we try this and it doesn't work? What if we're too different from 2 different worlds? Then we figure it out together. But what if we don't try and you and the baby suffer because you were afraid to trust me?" Gabrielle was quiet for a long time, her hand warm under his. "I need to think about this," she said finally. "Can you give me tonight? Just one more night to think." Ethan wanted to argue that there wasn't time, that every day of delay was another day without proper medical care. But pushing her now would only confirm her fears that he was trying to control the situation. "One night," he agreed. "But Gabrielle? Whatever you're afraid of, we can face it together. You don't have to protect everyone all the time." As Ethan walked back to his motel room that evening, he couldn't shake the feeling that Gabrielle was still planning to run. The careful way she'd said goodbye, the way she'd avoided making any promises about tomorrow, everything suggested she was still looking for an escape route. But where could she go that would be better than accepting help from someone who genuinely cared about her? The answer, Ethan realized with growing alarm, was nowhere. Which meant if Gabrielle ran again, it wouldn't be because she had a better plan. It would be because her fear of depending on him was stronger than her concern for her own well-being and that of their children. The next morning, Ethan woke to find an envelope slipped under his motel room door. His heart sank, expecting another goodbye note, but instead he found a flyer for the Millfield Community Center's fundraising breakfast. At the bottom, someone had written in pencil, "Gabby will be here helping serve. Thought you might want to know. Helen." Ethan showered quickly and drove to the community center, a modest building that looked like it had been serving the town for decades. The parking lot was full of pickup trucks and family cars, and the sound of laughter and conversation drifted from the open doors. Inside he found a scene of organized chaos. Volunteers bustled between tables laden with pancakes, eggs, and bacon while families filled every available seat. The warm atmosphere was exactly what a small-town fundraiser should be. Neighbors helping neighbors, children playing between the tables, and everyone working together for a common cause. He spotted Gabrielle immediately. She was behind the serving counter, her dark hair pulled back in a neat bun, wearing a simple white blouse and a community center apron. Despite her obvious fatigue, she was smiling as she served breakfast to a steady stream of local residents. Ethan watched her interact with the people in line, asking about family members, remembering names, making each person feel welcomed and valued. She'd been in town less than a week, but she was already woven into the community fabric in a way that suggested she belonged here. "You must be Ethan," said a voice beside him. He turned to find a man about his own age, wearing jeans and a flannel shirt, extending a work-calloused hand. "I'm Tom Bradley. I run the community center here. Helen Peterson told me you might stop by." They shook hands. "Nice to meet you. This is quite an event you've got here." "Gabrielle's idea, actually. She heard we were struggling to raise funds for our after-school program and suggested we organize a breakfast fundraiser. She's been here since 5 this morning helping Helen and the other volunteers get everything ready." Ethan looked back at Gabrielle, who was now crouched down talking to a little boy who seemed shy about the crowd. She was showing him something, Ethan couldn't see what, but whatever it was made the child smile and take her hand as she guided him to a table with his family. "She's good with kids," Tom continued. "Natural gift for it. We could use someone like her in our after-school program, but she says she won't be staying in Millfield long-term." "What kind of after-school program?" Ethan asked. "Homework help, mainly. Art projects, some basic tutoring for kids who need extra support." A lot of our families have parents working multiple jobs, so the kids need somewhere safe to go after school. Problem is, we can barely afford to keep the building open, let alone hire qualified staff. Ethan nodded, an idea beginning to form. How much would it cost to fund the program properly? Hypothetically speaking. Tom looked surprised by the question. Well, to run it the way we'd like, with proper supplies, maybe some educational field trips and enough staff to really help the kids, probably around $50,000 a year. But that's dreaming big. We're trying to raise $5,000 just to keep the basics going. $50,000. Ethan repeated the number, which represented less than he typically spent on business lunches in a month. Before Tom could ask why he was interested, a commotion near the serving area caught their attention. Gabrielle had suddenly stopped serving and was gripping the edge of the counter, her face pale. Ethan was moving toward her before he consciously decided to, reaching her just as she swayed dangerously. "Whoa, easy," he said, putting his arm around her waist to steady her. "I've got you." "I'm fine," Gabrielle protested, but she didn't pull away from his support. Just felt dizzy for a second. Helen appeared at Gabrielle's other side. "That's it, honey? You're taking a break. You've been on your feet for 4 hours. But the breakfast isn't over yet. People are still. People will survive without you for 20 minutes, Helen said firmly. "Ethan, can you get her some fresh air? There's a bench outside." Ethan guided Gabrielle out of the community center and to a wooden bench in a small garden area beside the building. She sat down heavily, her breathing a little uneven. "When was the last time you ate something?" he asked. "I had some toast this morning before we started setting up." "That was 6 hours ago." Ethan sat beside her, careful not to crowd her space. "Gabrielle, you can't skip meals when you're pregnant with triplets. Your body needs constant fuel." "I know that. I just got busy helping with the fundraiser and forgot." Ethan studied her profile. "Is this what you did at the hospital? Took care of everyone else while forgetting to take care of yourself?" She was quiet for a moment. "Maybe. That's not sustainable with 3 babies on the way." "I know," she said softly. "I know all the things I should be doing, Ethan. I know I need better medical care and proper nutrition and regular rest. I know I should be taking prenatal vitamins every day and seeing a specialist. You just what? I don't know how to accept help without feeling like I'm losing control of my own life." Ethan felt something shift in his chest. This wasn't really about trust or money or different social worlds. This was about a woman who had spent her entire adult life taking care of other people, and who had no idea how to let anyone take care of her. What if it wasn't about losing control? He asked. What if it was about having a partner? Gabrielle looked at him. "What do you mean?" "I mean, what if instead of me taking over your life we built a life together? What if you didn't have to choose between independence and help?" "I don't understand." Ethan took a deep breath. "Tom Bradley told me about the after-school program here. About how much it would cost to run it properly." $50,000, Gabrielle said. "Which might as well be 50 million for a town this size. What if someone funded it? What if the program could hire a qualified director who happened to be an experienced pediatric nurse?" Gabrielle's eyes widened. "Ethan, what are you saying?" "I'm saying maybe there's a way for you to have the career you love, in a place where you feel comfortable, while still getting the support you need for the pregnancy. Maybe we don't have to choose between your world and mine." "You would do that? Fund an entire program just so I could work here?" "I would do that because $50,000 is pocket change to me, but it would transform the lives of dozens of children in this community. I would do it because I've seen how you light up around kids, and I think you deserve to have work that feeds your soul. And yes, I would do it because it would mean we could try to build something together without you having to give up everything that matters to you." Tears were streaming down Gabrielle's cheeks. "But what about your business? Your life in the city?" "I can run my business from anywhere with an internet connection." "And my life in the city?" Ethan paused, looking around at the small town where people knew each other's names and helped with community fundraisers on Saturday mornings. Maybe my life in the city was missing something important. Gabrielle was crying harder now, and Ethan wasn't sure if that was good or bad. "Hey," he said gently, "what's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong," she managed. "Everything's right, and that terrifies me more than everything being wrong." Ethan reached for her hand. "Why?" "Because if I let myself believe this could work, if I let myself trust you completely, and then something goes wrong, then we deal with it together. But Gabrielle, if you don't let yourself try, you'll never know what we could have built." She squeezed his hand, and for the first time since he'd found her, Ethan felt hope that maybe, just maybe, she was ready to stop running. The Millfield Community Center had never seen anything like it. In the 3 days since Ethan's offer to fund the after-school program, word had spread through the small town like wildfire. The mysterious businessman who was courting their newest resident had just committed to providing enough money to transform their struggling community center into something extraordinary. Gabrielle stood in the center's main room, watching contractors take measurements and discuss renovation plans with Tom Bradley. Ethan was on his phone in the corner, apparently arranging for educational supplies to be delivered from the city. "I still can't believe this is happening," Tom said, approaching Gabrielle with a grin that hadn't left his face since Ethan had made the official commitment. A fully funded after-school program, new computers for the kids, art supplies, even a small library. It's like Christmas in July. Gabrielle smiled, though her emotions were more complicated than pure joy. Watching Ethan transform lives with casual generosity was both wonderful and overwhelming. The ease with which he solved problems that seemed impossible to everyone else highlighted the vast difference in their resources and capabilities. "He's a good man," she said, more to herself than to Tom. "He's a man in love," Tom corrected. "I've seen plenty of charity in my time, rich folks who write checks to feel good about themselves. This isn't that. This is a man trying to build a world where the woman he loves can be happy." Before Gabrielle could respond, her phone rang. The caller ID showed Dr. Miller's office. "Excuse me," she told Tom, stepping outside to take the call. "Gabrielle? This is Dr. Miller. I have some test results I need to discuss with you. Can you come in today?" Something in the doctor's tone made Gabrielle's heart skip. "Is everything okay? I'd rather discuss this in person. How soon can you be here?" An hour later, Gabrielle sat in Dr. Miller's office with Ethan beside her. She'd asked him to come, needing support for whatever news awaited them. "Your blood work shows some concerning changes," Dr. Miller began without preamble. "Your blood pressure is continuing to rise, and you're showing early signs of preeclampsia." "Preeclampsia?" Ethan repeated. "What does that mean?" "It's a pregnancy complication that can be serious if not properly managed," Dr. Miller explained. "With triplets, the risk is even higher. Gabrielle needs to be monitored much more closely, and she may need to be on modified bed rest." Gabrielle felt the room spinning slightly. "How modified?" "Limited activity, no more than a few hours on your feet per day, regular blood pressure monitoring, and immediate access to emergency medical care if symptoms worsen." "What kind of symptoms?" Ethan asked. "Severe headaches, vision changes, abdominal pain, sudden swelling. If any of those occur, she needs to get to a hospital immediately." Gabrielle looked at her hands. "So no more working at the diner. No more helping with community center activities." "Not for now. Your body is telling you to slow down and you need to listen." As they left Dr. Miller's office, Gabrielle felt like her world was shrinking. The small independence she'd managed to maintain was disappearing, replaced by medical restrictions and the need for constant monitoring. "This changes everything," she said as they walked slowly back to Ethan's rental car. "It doesn't change anything that matters," Ethan replied. "You need rest and medical care. We'll make sure you get both." Ethan stopped walking and turned to face her. "Gabrielle, I think it's time we stop pretending this is temporary. You're pregnant with my children, you need specialized medical care, and you're not going to get better by working 12-hour shifts at a diner and living above a restaurant." "What are you suggesting?" "I'm suggesting you let me take care of you. Really take care of you. Proper medical care, proper nutrition, a comfortable place to rest. Everything you and the babies need." Gabrielle looked around at Millfield's quiet streets, at the life she'd been trying to build here. "And the community center position? We'll be waiting for you after the babies are born and you're ready to work again. I meant what I said about funding the program long-term." They continued walking in silence until they reached the harbor, where fishing boats bobbed gently in the afternoon sun. Gabrielle found a bench and sat down, needing to process everything. "I have something to tell you," she said finally. Ethan sat beside her, waiting. "The night I left, I didn't just find out I was pregnant. I found out other things too." "What kind of things?" Gabrielle took a deep breath. "I researched you. Really researched you. Your business, your background, your dating history." Ethan winced. "Gabrielle? I saw the articles about you and Rebecca Hamilton. The photos of you two at charity events and business functions. She's beautiful, sophisticated, from the same world you are. Rebecca and I broke up 2 years ago." "I know. But I also saw the interview where you talked about what you were looking for in a relationship. You said you needed someone who understood the demands of your lifestyle, someone who could handle the pressure of being with a public figure." Ethan was quiet, remembering the interview she was referencing. It had been for a business magazine, and he'd answered their personal questions without much thought. I read that, Gabrielle continued, and I realized I was everything you said you didn't want. I was an unemployed nurse from a working-class background who had no idea how to navigate your world. When I found out I was pregnant, I panicked. So you ran. I ran because I thought you'd see me and the babies as problems that needed to be managed, not people you wanted in your life. Ethan turned to face her fully. Gabrielle, that interview was me talking about what I thought I wanted based on relationships that didn't work. But you know what I discovered? None of those sophisticated women who understood my world ever made me want to be a better person. None of them ever made me question whether success was worth anything if I didn't have someone meaningful to share it with. But nothing. Rebecca Hamilton understood my lifestyle perfectly, and our relationship was perfectly empty. You challenge me, you inspire me, you make me want to build something real instead of just accumulating more success. Gabrielle was crying again, but this time Ethan could tell they were different tears. I love you, he said simply. Not because you're carrying my children, not because I feel obligated to help you, but because you're the first person who ever made me understand what love actually means. I love you too, Gabrielle whispered. That's why I was so scared. I've never had anything this important to lose before. Ethan took her hands in his. Then don't lose it. Let's build something together. Let's give our children parents who love each other and aren't afraid to show it. As the sun set over Millfield Harbor, Gabrielle finally allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, love could be enough to bridge any gap between their worlds. 2 weeks later, Gabrielle woke up in a bedroom she was still getting used to, the master suite of the house Ethan had rented on the outskirts of Millfield. Large windows overlooked the harbor, and morning sunlight streamed across hardwood floors and comfortable furniture that managed to be both elegant and welcoming. The house had been Ethan's compromise solution to her medical needs. Instead of insisting she move back to the city where the best specialists were located, he'd arranged for Dr. Jennifer Santos to make weekly trips to Millfield to monitor Gabrielle's condition. It cost considerably more than regular appointments, but it allowed Gabrielle to stay in the community where she felt comfortable while getting the specialized care she needed. Good morning, Ethan said, appearing in the doorway with a breakfast tray. How are you feeling today? Like I'm being spoiled ridiculously, Gabrielle replied, accepting the tray with a smile. You don't have to bring me breakfast in bed every morning. Dr. Santos said you need to start each day with proper nutrition and minimal stress. Besides, I like taking care of you. Gabrielle studied his face as he arranged pillows behind her back. Over the past 2 weeks, she'd watched Ethan adapt to a completely different lifestyle. The man who used to start each day with business calls and high-pressure meetings now began each morning by making her breakfast and checking her blood pressure. Don't you miss it? She asked. Miss what? Your old life. The excitement, the deal-making, the constant activity. Ethan sat on the edge of the bed. I still run my business, Gabrielle. I just do it from here instead of from a penthouse office. And honestly, I'm more productive now than I've been in years. Turns out I don't need constant meetings and social events to make good decisions. But what about when the babies come? 3 infants aren't going to be exactly peaceful. Then we'll figure it out together. We'll hire help if we need it, we'll take turns getting up at night, we'll make mistakes and learn as we go. That's what parents do. Gabrielle took a bite of the perfectly prepared scrambled eggs and fresh fruit. Sometimes I still can't believe this is real. What part? All of it. You being here, this beautiful house, having someone take care of me for once instead of the other way around. It feels too good to be true. Ethan reached over and placed his hand gently on her growing belly. At nearly 4 months pregnant with triplets, she was already showing significantly. It's real, he said. And it's just the beginning. A knock on the front door interrupted them. Ethan checked his watch. That'll be Tom Bradley. We're finalizing the community center renovation plans today. I thought that was all settled. The basic program funding is settled. But Tom had some additional ideas and I wanted to run them by you before making any decisions. Gabrielle felt a familiar flutter of anxiety. Ethan, you don't need my permission to make charitable donations. This isn't about permission. It's about partnership. The after-school program was your idea, and you're going to be running it eventually. I want to make sure we're building something you're excited about. 20 minutes later, Tom Bradley was spreading architectural drawings across their dining room table while Gabrielle looked on from the couch where Ethan had insisted she rest. So the main renovation will give us 3 new classrooms, a proper computer lab, and an expanded kitchen for after-school snacks, Tom explained. But Gabrielle mentioned that some of the kids might benefit from counseling services, and we have space for a small therapy office if you think that's worth including. Ethan looked to Gabrielle. What do you think? I think it's brilliant, she said. A lot of the children I worked with at the hospital had behavioral issues that stemmed from trauma or family stress. Having someone trained in child psychology available could make a huge difference. Then we include it, Ethan said. What else? Tom pulled out another set of plans. This is more ambitious, but Gabrielle also mentioned that some families struggle with basic healthcare access. If we expanded the building a bit more, we could include a small medical clinic. Nothing fancy, just basic primary care and pediatric services. Gabrielle's eyes widened. Tom, that would cost about $200,000 total, Ethan finished, studying the plans. Including equipment and the first year of staffing costs. Ethan, no. That's too much. The after-school program is already incredibly generous. Gabrielle, what did you tell me about the families you worked with at the hospital? She thought back to their conversations about her former patients. That many of them delayed seeking medical care because they couldn't afford it, which made their conditions worse and more expensive to treat in the long run. And what did you say was the most heartbreaking part of your job? Seeing preventable problems become serious because families didn't have access to basic health care. Ethan turned back to Tom. How many children and families would a clinic like this serve? Probably 300 or 400 families in the immediate area, plus seasonal workers who don't have regular physicians. Then we're not just talking about an after-school program anymore, Ethan said. We're talking about a community health and education center. Something that could serve families for generations. Gabrielle felt tears welling up again. You're serious about this? I'm serious about building something meaningful. About using resources to make a real difference. About creating a place where you can do the work you love while raising our children in a community that supports families. Tom looked between them. I feel like I should mention that a project this size would probably require a board of directors, grant applications, and a lot of administrative oversight. Good point, Ethan said. Gabrielle, how do you feel about the title of executive director? I can't be an executive director. I don't have an MBA or administrative experience. You have 5 years of experience working with children and families in crisis. You understand what this community needs better than any MBA. The rest you can learn. Gabrielle looked at the architectural plans spread across their table. Plans for a facility that could transform healthcare and education access for hundreds of families. Plans that existed because Ethan had listened to her dreams and figured out how to make them reality. I need some air, she said, feeling overwhelmed. Ethan was immediately concerned. Are you feeling okay? Dizzy? Any pain? No, this is a lot to process. She stepped onto the back deck that overlooked Millfield's harbor. The town stretched out below her, small houses, local businesses, fishing boats, and people living modest but meaningful lives. People who would benefit enormously from the kind of comprehensive community center Ethan was proposing. A few minutes later, Ethan joined her on the deck. Too much, he asked. Not too much. Just perfect. So perfect that I keep waiting for something to go wrong. What if nothing goes wrong? Then I guess I need to learn how to accept happiness instead of constantly preparing for disaster. Ethan moved to stand behind her, wrapping his arms around her from behind and resting his hands on her growing belly. Our children are going to grow up in a world where their mother is a community leader who helps families access healthcare and education, he said. They're going to see that success means using your resources to lift other people up. They're going to learn that love isn't just a feeling, it's action. Gabrielle leaned back against his chest. And what are they going to learn from their father? That keeping your word matters. That treating people with respect is more important than making money. That being powerful only means something if you use that power to protect people you care about. They stood together watching the harbor, planning a future that felt both impossible and inevitable. There's something else we need to talk about, Gabrielle said eventually. What's that? Where we're going to live long term. This house is beautiful, but it's a rental. The babies will need stability, permanent addresses for school registration, pediatricians who know their medical history. Ethan was quiet for a moment. What would you like? Do you want to stay in Millfield? Move back to the city? Find somewhere completely new? I love it here. The pace, the community, the way people know each other's names. But I don't want you to feel trapped in a small town because of my preferences. Gabrielle, I've spent the past month working from this small town, and my business hasn't suffered at all. I've made more thoughtful decisions, had better conversations with clients, and felt more satisfied with my work than I have in years. This place isn't trapping me, it's freeing me from things that were never actually important. So you'd want to stay here permanently? I'd want to make this our home base. We can travel when we need to, visit the city for business or entertainment, but yes, I'd like our children to grow up here. Gabrielle turned in his arms to face him. Then I guess we should start looking at houses. Actually, Ethan said with a slight smile, I already put an offer in on this house. The owner accepted yesterday. You bought this house without asking me? I bought this house because I could see how happy you are here, and because I want to wake up every morning looking at the harbor with you. But if you hate the idea, we can find somewhere else. Gabrielle looked around at the deck where she'd spent many mornings reading, at the windows that filled every room with natural light, at the view that never failed to make her feel peaceful. I love this house, she admitted. I love the way the nursery upstairs gets morning sun, and how the kitchen is big enough for a family but cozy enough for intimate dinners. I love that we can see the community center from here, and that there's room for the children to play safely. Then it settled. This is home. As if responding to their conversation about the future, Gabrielle felt a flutter of movement in her belly. The first time she'd clearly felt the babies moving. Oh, she gasped, placing her hand over the spot. What's wrong? Ethan asked immediately. Nothing's wrong. They're moving. The babies are moving. Ethan's eyes went wide. Can I feel it? Gabrielle guided his hand to the right spot and they waited. After a moment there was another flutter, then what felt like a tiny kick. That's them, Gabrielle whispered. That's our children. Ethan's face showed wonder and something that might have been tears. They're real. They're real and they're ours, and we're going to love them so much. Standing on the deck of their new home, feeling their children move for the first time, Gabrielle finally allowed herself to believe completely in the future they were building together. 6 months later, Gabrielle woke to a contraction that was definitely different from the Braxton Hicks contractions she'd been experiencing for weeks. She lay still for a moment, timing it, then felt another one 15 minutes later. Ethan, she said softly, shaking his shoulder. I think it's time. Ethan was instantly awake. Time? As in labor time? As in labor time. The contractions are regular and they're getting stronger. Over the past month, they'd prepared for this moment obsessively. The hospital bag had been packed for weeks, Dr. Santos was on standby, and they'd practiced the route to the regional medical center countless times. But now that the moment was actually here, Ethan looked slightly panicked. Okay, he said, taking deep breaths. Hospital bag, car keys, phone charger. Do you need anything else? I need you to calm down, Gabrielle said with a small smile. We have time. First labors are usually long, and with triplets, they'll probably do a cesarean section anyway. Right. Cesarean. Which means surgery. Which means... Ethan sat down heavily on the bed. What if something goes wrong? Gabrielle took his hands. Hey, look at me. I've had excellent prenatal care, the babies are healthy, and Dr. Santos is one of the best maternal fetal specialists in the state. Everything is going to be fine. Another contraction hit, stronger this time, and Gabrielle gripped Ethan's hands while she breathed through it. Okay, Ethan said when it passed. We're going to the hospital now. The drive to the medical center was surreal. After months of preparation and anticipation, they were finally on their way to meet their children. Gabrielle watched familiar landmarks pass by. The community center where construction was nearly complete, the diner where Helen had given her refuge, the harbor where she and Ethan had first talked honestly about their fears. Are you scared? Ethan asked as they pulled into the hospital parking lot. Terrified, Gabrielle admitted, but also excited. We're about to become parents. We're about to become parents of 3 babies at once. Details. The next few hours passed in a blur of medical procedures, monitoring equipment, and increasing intensity. Dr. Santos arrived within an hour of their call, and after examining Gabrielle, confirmed that the babies were ready to make their appearance. Everything looks good, she told them. Baby A is in position for delivery, but with triplets I recommend a cesarean to minimize risks for all 3. Are you comfortable with that decision? Gabrielle nodded. She'd known this was likely, and at this point she just wanted the babies to arrive safely. How are you feeling? Ethan asked, holding her hand as they prepared for surgery. Like I'm about to meet the 3 most important people in my life, Gabrielle said. Besides you. Besides me. In the operating room, Ethan sat beside Gabrielle's head, both of them dressed in surgical gowns and caps. The atmosphere was calm and professional, with Dr. Santos narrating each step of the procedure. Here comes baby number 1, Dr. Santos announced. The sound that followed was the most beautiful thing Gabrielle had ever heard, the loud, indignant cry of their first child. "It's a girl," Dr. Santos said, holding up a tiny, perfect baby. "And she has excellent lungs." Gabrielle burst into tears. "She's beautiful. She's perfect," Ethan agreed, his voice thick with emotion. "Baby number 2 is coming now," Dr. Santos continued. Within minutes, another cry filled the room. "Another girl," Dr. Santos announced. "And she's eager to join her sister." "2 girls," Gabrielle whispered. "And here comes baby number 3. The third cry was slightly quieter but just as determined. "And we have a boy," Dr. Santos said with a smile. 3 healthy babies. Congratulations." As the medical team cleaned and examined each baby, Gabrielle and Ethan held each other and cried. After months of uncertainty, fear, and preparation, their children were here and healthy. "Mr. Rodriguez, would you like to cut the umbilical cords?" Dr. Santos asked. With shaking hands, Ethan helped welcome each of their children fully into the world. One by one, the babies were placed on Gabrielle's chest for their first moments together as a family. Each child was tiny but perfectly formed, with wisps of dark hair and the most alert, curious expressions. "What are we going to name them?" Ethan asked, gently stroking the oldest girl's tiny hand. They'd discussed names for months but had never made final decisions. "I was thinking," Gabrielle said looking at their son, "that he looks like a Noah. Something strong but gentle." "Noah Rodriguez Washington," Ethan said, trying out the hyphenated last name they'd agreed on. "I like it. What about the girls?" Gabrielle looked at the baby in her arms, the first to be born, the one who'd announced her arrival with such determination. "Hope," she said. "She's Hope." "Hope Rodriguez Washington," Ethan repeated. "Perfect. And this little one?" The second girl was smaller than her siblings, with the most serious expression, as if she was already contemplating the world she'd just entered. "Faith," Gabrielle said without hesitation. "Hope, Faith and Noah. Our children," Ethan said wonderfully. "Our family." Later that evening, after the babies had been examined, weighed, and settled in the NICU for monitoring, standard procedure for triplets, Ethan sat beside Gabrielle's hospital bed while she rested. "How are you feeling?" he asked. "Sore, exhausted, and completely happy," she said. "How are you feeling?" "Like the luckiest man alive. Like I can't believe this is really my life." Gabrielle reached for his hand. "There's something I want to ask you." "Anything." "Will you marry me?" she said with a smile. Ethan stared at her. "Are you seriously proposing to me in a hospital bed 6 hours after giving birth to triplets?" "I'm seriously proposing to you because I love you, because you're an amazing father already, and because I can't imagine spending my life with anyone else." Ethan leaned down and kissed her gently. "Yes, absolutely yes. But I have a confession." "What's that?" He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. "I was planning to propose to you tomorrow when you were feeling better." Gabrielle started laughing. "We're both ridiculous. We're both in love." As Ethan slipped the ring onto her finger, Gabrielle realized that her greatest fear, that happiness this complete couldn't last, had been replaced by absolute certainty that they could handle anything together. Their love story hadn't started with a fairy tale meet-cute or proceeded with storybook smoothness. It had been messy and complicated, full of fear and misunderstandings and 2 people learning to trust each other with their hearts. But it had led them here, to this hospital room where 3 tiny miracles slept peacefully while their parents planned a future built on love, partnership, and the absolute certainty that together, they could create something beautiful. "I love you," Gabrielle whispered. "I love you too," Ethan replied. "All 4 of you." As they sat together in the quiet hospital room, surrounded by flowers from the people of Millfield who had become their chosen family, Gabrielle knew with absolute certainty that running away had been the best mistake she'd ever made. Because it had led her straight to the man who would chase her across 300 miles just to prove that love could conquer any fear. Their children would grow up knowing that their parents had fought for their family, that love was worth taking risks for, and that sometimes the most beautiful beginnings come from the most terrifying decisions. Outside their window, the lights of the city twinkled like stars, but Gabrielle's heart was already back in Millfield, in the house by the harbor where they would raise Hope, Faith, and Noah with all the love 2 people could possibly give. Their story was just beginning. Dear readers, thank you so much for taking this journey with Ethan and Gabrielle. Their story of unexpected love, second chances, and building a family against all odds really touched my heart while writing it. I'd love to hear from you. What did you think about Gabrielle's decision to run away initially? Do you think Ethan handled finding her the right way? And what are your thoughts on them choosing to build their life in small-town Millfield rather than the big city? Which of the three babies, Hope, Faith, or Noah, do you think will be the most adventurous as they grow up? Please share your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one and love hearing your perspectives on these characters and their choices.